Happy Father's Day. One of the things that Craig wanted to make sure that I got to mention to you is we have a gift for dads as you leave this morning. And it's the same gift we gave mothers, but different. So, last year we got in trouble because we did truffles for ladies and pork sliders for guys. And some guys wanted truffles and a lot of the ladies wanted pork sliders. So this year we said, fine, we'll give you all coffee, all right? And so we've got a small gift for you as you leave today. Fathers, men, guys, you get a gift as you walk out today. Don't let the ladies take it, all right? Sound good? If you need a Bible this morning, would you raise your hand, please, and our ushers will get you one. Listen, I want to mention something. Hopefully you read an email from me this week. Just kind of reflecting on my own heart, my own feelings with the events that took place on Tuesday morning. But I wanted to talk just briefly about what we get to do as a church moving in the future here, okay? We all know what happened Tuesday morning at Reynolds High School right here in our own community. 1.8 miles from here. And it's kind of rocks your boat a little bit. Kind of messes with you just a little bit. And I love the way C.S. Lewis says, it's a deeper pain than just a toothache. It's a deeper pain. It's something that you can't quite describe. And so yet we've got to reconcile that. We've got to deal with that. And so we're pretty fortunate. We've got a gentleman who attends church here. His name is Larry Whittlesley. And Larry was on staff at Crossroads Christian Church for several years. And he's also the executive director for the Luis Palau organization for the School Partnership Network. And so they've asked him to kind of lead and organize and execute this vigil on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. at the Reynolds High School football field. And so it's pretty cool, and I just want to invite you to participate in that. If you're able and you can. I know some of you go to bed a lot earlier than 9 p.m., so we'll grant grace to you. But if you could make that, I think it would be really important for us, especially the faith community, to show up and to represent and to encourage and to lift, just a hard space, you know what I mean? Just kind of a hard area. Another thing that might happen is we might be calling some of you guys in the last few hours, Monday or Tuesday. We'll send out an email. We might be looking for some volunteers to help out, do some things. And I thought, I bet Mountain View would show up if we said, hey, there's a couple of volunteer opportunities. Would you fill those up? So those are just a couple of things that I wanted you to be aware of as we begin this morning and talk about our topic here. So sound good? Watch the email, watch Facebook, watch all those good things. If you don't have any of those, let me know. I'll even make a personal call to you and say, hey, this is what's going on. Here's what's happening. Sound good? Perfect. O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. It's been our prayer for the last several weeks. And it's our prayer again today, and I'm telling you, there's definitely a part of me that's like, whew, what a message to speak, After what's happened this week, and then I know because I've had so many conversations with so many of you. You've lost loved ones recently, or you yourself have been given a kind of a gloomy medical report. And here I am talking about these type of things, and you're going, this is a heavy thing. And yet this needs to be our prayer, does it not? The words of David, O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. As a rabbi named Harold Kushner, he said this, and I love what he said. He said this, I am convinced that it is not the fear of death of our lives ending that haunts our sleep so much as the fear that as far as the world is concerned, we might as well never lived that haunts us. That's what he's saying. It's not that how we're going to die or how our life on earth is going to end that keeps us awake. It's the fact that we wonder, did we make a difference? Did we make an impact? Did we change the world? Did I have an influence, if you will, are my fingerprints all over the place? Because I strive to make a difference. In this series, I've attempted to help us all realize that our time on earth really it's very short. It's very limited. And I know for a fact, because some of you have shared, that this thought has challenged you. Some of you, it's made you squirm. You've told me so. For some of you, it's slightly frustrated you. Because it's not something that you necessarily really want to talk about. And yet, for others, it's brought a peace to you as you've described what kind of peace it's brought to you the last few weeks, that it's forced you to maybe recognize some things that you've not recognized lately. It's made you make a point to do some things different. Why are all these emotions, why are they all caught up with this thought of our life on earth being so short? I mean, why do we get so many emotions when we think that our life on earth is just so short and we don't have a lot of time? Because no matter who you are, how old or how young, what measure of success that you've attained, where you've lived, or even what political party you've associated with yourself, death is an equalizer. Death is not prejudiced. Death gets you if you're rich or whether you're poor, whether you're black or whether you're white, whether you're Democrat or whether you're Republican, whether you grew up on that side of the tracks or those side of the tracks. Death is an equalizer. Death is not prejudiced. With every second of life, a second of your life is now behind you. And our days are numbered, and as each day passes, it passes forever. Forever. You can't get it back. You can't attain it. And this is why it is so incredibly important to embrace the days that we do have on earth, not to take advantage of them, but to live them to the fullest ability that we can. Most of us, if we knew we only had 1 month to live, would live our lives a little bit differently. And the question is this: why don't we live that way now? What is keeping us from living that way, about being intentional, living life intentional, being deliberate about how we spend our time and our money and the places we go and the people we're with? Why don't we live this way now? If we all lived as if we had 1 month to live, we would spend every day different likely than the way we do now. And my final challenge in this series is for us to live like we're dying by embracing every day as a special gift from God. Every day you have, you need to consider it as precious, special gift that God's given you to maybe do something, to make a difference, to make an impact, to have an influence on our world. So how do we do that? I have 4 simple observations, and some of these things are going to be reviews from the last 3 weeks, but hopefully they're helpful. Live passionately. That's the first one. Live passionately. Listen, God did not design us to stand by and watch our lives pass by. He did not create us to stand off to the side and kind of watch life happen. God designed us to be in the game of life, to run the race, to participate, to be involved in it, not just to stand back and watch it. He didn't intend us, He didn't create us to watch life pass us by and wonder why we don't feel accomplished or fulfilled. God created us to take risks. He created us to be involved in the game, to be in the middle of the game, to take risks in our faith. The primary reason we don't take risks is often because we look at our life and we see these great big giants in our life and we don't quite know what to do with the giants. You know what I mean? There's giants, right? You get up in the morning and you think of all the giants you've got to tackle that day. And sometimes those giants get overwhelming and we don't quite know what to do with all of those giants. They scare us. They put fear in us. They scare the tar out of us. And sometimes we just don't know what to do with those. And as I was thinking about this week, I was reminded of 1 Samuel chapter 17. If you have your Bibles, turn there. Let's summarize some of this really quick. But you know what the story is, don't you? Who is the biggest giant in the Bible? Goliath. Who was the little boy who took Goliath down? David. And I think that I want us to look at this passage really quick, and I want us to see what tools, what do we need to live passionately so that we can get rid of these giants in our life. So you got 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm going to start at verse 4. Listen to this. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath. Sounds like a fun name, doesn't it? whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. Why do you need a shield bearer when you're that big? Anyway, that's one of those questions that I have. He stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not a servant of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." How many of you feel like the Israelites sometimes? That you look at life and you see down this trail of life, and what do you see? You see this big giant. Every time I pay our mortgage, I think, oh, this giant is huge. It's huge. What is it for you? What is it for you? When we start talking about giants in your life, what comes to mind? What hits your heart? Is it raising your kids? Figuring out how to send them to college? What is it? Is it your job? Maybe it's even deeper than that. Maybe it's some of those relational things we've talked about. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe it's your pride or greed. I mean, when you think of your life, what keeps you from living a life of full faith? What giants are in your way? And I love this story because, as you know, David's dad sends food for his brothers, and David takes it, and David shows up in the middle of one of these conversations, and he says, "Why aren't you guys doing something about this? I mean, don't you have God on your side?" Basically is what David's asking. Don't you have God on your side? And he begins these conversations, and the Israelites are saying, "But we're scared to death of this guy, of Goliath. Have you seen him? Do you see how big he is? Do you not understand why we're hanging out here? You going to go fight him?" And David must kind of think, why not? So they take him to Saul, and they begin having this conversation. I love this, verse 33. Saul says to David, "You are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are but of youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." And David, verse 34, said to Saul, he said, But king, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. I mean, David says, Saul, we've all kept our father's sheep. And one of our sheep is in trouble. What do? We fight against it. We do everything we can to save the sheep or the lamb. We do everything we can. And it's fascinating because you get to verse 48. When the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistines with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in his hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, and, well, we'll leave it there. But do you see it? I mean, I want us to look at David. To live passionately, we need to be like David. We need to fight the giants in our lives. What David was doing looked silly to Saul, did it not? I mean, Saul thought, you silly, silly little boy. What do you think you're doing? We are warriors, and I am a king, and I'm scared to go out there. And David said, but you don't understand. Saul and the Israelite army, what were they using? They were using 100% of their reason. And when we start to use reason, guess how big the giants seem to us? They're huge. We start to explain everything away. I would give my life to Jesus, but I just don't understand this, or I don't understand this, or I don't understand some things. What do you mean? I would stop doing this, or I'd stop doing that. This addiction just takes over my life, but I don't know how to cope without it. It sure does seem scary. It sure does seem too big to cope without it. And we start to use this reason. We start to think, I don't like my job, and I wish I could do something more fulfilling, but man, how do I pay the bills, and how do I find the job that's just right for me? So I'm better off just staying where I'm at. I mean, we start to use reason for all our life, yet David used his faith. When we use reason to live, we see how big the giants are in our lives, but when we use faith to live, the giants are still there. Don't hear me wrong, they're still there. They're just a lot smaller than God is. God just happens to be a whole lot bigger than the giants in your life. God's a whole lot bigger than the giants in my life. And when we use our faith to fight the giants, all of a sudden God gets to be pretty big. To live passionate lives, we need faith. And we need faith in God. What are the giants in your life? What cripples you with fear? What giants need fought so you can live life passionately? Number 2 is this. Love completely. Love completely. 1 Peter 4 says this, keep loving one another earnestly. And we talked about this word last week, I believe. Keep loving one another earnestly. God designed us for relationships, did He not? Most of us really do desire to have deep relationships with our families, with our friends, with our circles of influence, within our communities. We've also all experienced the mess of relationships, have we not? How many have messy relationships? Great, I'm not alone. That makes me always feel good. I mean, we have expectations, disappointments, betrayals, we have hurts, we have lies, we have misunderstandings. I mean, these are just a few of the obstacles that we have when dealing with loved ones, right? I mean, it's all in the day of having a family, on the day of working with people. But if you had 1 month to live, would you not rearrange your schedules? Would you not travel distances? Would money no longer be an interference so that you could go and share your heart with who you value most? I mean, would you not do that? If you knew you had 1 month to live, would you not do everything in your power to spend that time with the people you value most? You would do almost anything you could to connect with people who you valued. Yet, in our everyday life, we make excuse after excuse after excuse for not connecting this way now. Our lives are busy. We're constantly on the go. We work long hours. And we work long hours for the people we love while missing quality time with the people we value the most. Why don't we live our lives in such a way where relationships matter most? Why do we wait for people to die before we tell them how much we love them and how much we care about them? If we knew we had 1 month to live, we would need to love completely. Listen, don't let your spouse become a roommate. Don't allow your spouse to become a roommate who's there just to help and support you financially. Don't do that. You will regret it if you do. Don't let your children turn into people who are burdened on your schedules. Don't let family gatherings become social obligations. I mean, seriously, don't. Love completely. Love cannot be bought, and it carries a price tag. Loving completely always means taking a risk. It means we will need to forgive more. We will need to strive for unity more. It means we will have to resolve conflicts. It means we'll have to listen more than speak. We'll need to prioritize better, and we'll need to love like we want to be loved. Third, number 3 is this: learn humbly. How many of us have had life go exactly as we planned? I'm looking for the liar. Anybody? Anybody? Nobody's had life go exactly like you pictured it, right? I didn't think so. Life throws us all sorts of turns, doesn't it? I mean, all sorts of turns, mountaintops, valleys. Sometimes the wind rises and creates some changes in life, and the only way that we know how to survive the wind shifts that cause these changes in life is to learn. To humbly learn through them. We can learn how to shift our sails a little bit when the winds change. Listen to what Paul said in Acts. Paul was actually in a shipwreck, and so this is really fascinating because this is what he says in Acts chapter 28, verse 13. I hear pages, so I'll wait a second. Acts 28, verse 13. And from there we made a circuit, and we arrived at Rhegium. And after one day, a south wind sprang up, and on the second day we came to Puteoli. There we found brothers and were invited to stay with them for 7 days, and so then we came to Rome. This is a small little verse to illustrate what I want to talk about, but basically this is what happens. Paul's imprisoned, he's on this ship, and he's headed to Rome, and the wind rises, right? And it goes the wrong direction, and so Rome they're supposed to go, and Rome they don't go. How many of you could describe your life that way? That you really meant to go this way, but when the winds came, you just kind of went this way. And what do you do in the midst of those changes? And so see, the crew, they tried to fight it. They did everything they could to sail into the storm, and they realized that the wind was too strong and they just couldn't sail into the storm. And listen, change is inevitable, and sometimes we waste a lot of resources and a lot of time and a lot of energy to fight it, don't we? But we must learn how to adapt to life's unexpected changes. Situations. We need to move along with them. Otherwise, your ship, you will be destroyed. We tend to hold on to the past and hold on to the grip and hold on to the present as if it is our anchor, and it is not our anchor. Our anchor is who? Jesus Christ. If we don't learn to adapt to life's changes, we'll never find true peace and true joy, even though changes are scary and changes are frightening, uncertain, and can be threatening. Changes can also be healthy, and they can be fun, and they can be dynamic, and they can be refreshing in so many ways, and often changes are necessary. That's why God sends the wind in the first place. We must be prepared to learn humbly if we will survive the changes that we encounter. Finally, we need to leave boldly. An anonymous person wrote this, but this is what it says. When you are born, you were crying, and everyone around you was smiling. Live your life so that when you die, you will be smiling, and everyone around you will be crying. We were created for an adventure. This short life that we have, we were created for an adventure, and God designed us to take risks, to face big challenges, to accomplish incredible dreams. Why? To make a lasting impact for Him. If you had 1 month to live, my question is this: what legacy would you leave behind? One of my favorite youth group activities as a youth pastor was to go to a cemetery. Weird, I know. But as a youth pastor, I'd occasionally take students on a field trip, and we'd go look at old gravestones. More importantly, I wanted students to walk through the cemetery. I wanted them to look at these gravestones. I wanted them to ask the question, who were they? What kind of impact do you think they had? What did their life represent? And sometimes you'll find gravestones, even right here in Gresham, where birth dates were sometimes in the early 1800s. As we would look at these gravestones, I often would imagine what their lives were like. Did they have the same type of problems that we have? Did they have the same type of pains? Did the same diseases, the same stresses of life, the same relational stuff that we deal with? I mean, did they have all the same stuff? And what's interesting is you don't have any of these answers. As you're walking around a cemetery and looking at gravestones, you don't have any of these answers to these questions. Why? Because a person's entire life on a gravestone, their entire life is summarized in a dash. Other things are on the gravestone. Things like a birth date, which is something we don't have any control over. When you're born, who you're born to, what part of the world you're born into, what culture you're born into, who your parents are, and what day and what time you're born. You have zero control over. The other date is the date you die. And again, something that you don't have any control over. The whens, the wheres, the hows, the times, the day. You have no control over these things. And so on a gravestone, you have the birth date and the death date, which you have no control over. The only thing that you have control over is represented by a dash. And the question needs to be, what will your dash be like? The people who knew you the most, loved you the most, spent the most time with you, how would they describe your dash? The only thing we have control over, the only thing we get to decide is how we're going to use the dash. We get to decide how to spend that little dash, the little time that's in between those two dates. What are you spending your dash on? God wants us to know, I really do believe God wants us to know that our time on earth is limited and we need to spend our dash wisely. I want to share this poem with you. It's called The Dash. By Linda Ellis, it says this: I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone, from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved her know what the little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the car, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and what's real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? I want you to take a moment. I want everyone to take a moment. And I want you to think about your life. I want you to think about your dash. I want you to answer this question. Am I spending my dash wisely? I'm going to give you just a second to think about that. In Max Lucado's book, God Came Near, he tells the story. It says there was an engineer who operated a drawbridge across a mighty river. With a control panel of levers and switches, he set into motion a monstrous set of gears that either lifted the bridge for river traffic or closed it for the oncoming train. One day, this engineer took his young son to work with him. The fascinated boy, he hurled question after question after question after question at his dad, and it was not until the span had opened to allow the passage of the ship that the father noticed the questions had ceased and his son had left the room. He looked out the window of his control cabin and saw the young boy climbing on the teeth of the gears. And as he hurried towards the machinery to get his son, he heard the whistle of an approaching train. His pulse quickened. If he closed the bridge, there would be no time to retrieve his son. He had to make a choice. Either his son would be killed or a train of innocent passengers would be killed. A horrible dilemma mandated a horrible decision, and the engineer knew what he had to do as he reached for the lever. It is true that God could not save mankind without killing his son. And when it comes to asking this question about how we're going to spend our dash, you have to consider your relationship with Jesus Christ. Many of us are totally oblivious to the great sacrifice God has made. God gave His only Son who came to this earth, and He died for us to forgive us, to release us from our past guilt, to give us a purpose, to give us a future, which includes heaven. And our problem is not that we don't love God enough. That's not the problem. The problem is that we don't understand how much God loves us. If we could grasp just a little bit of how much God loves us, we would surrender all of our life to Him. We'd be willing to give 100% of ourselves to Him. God would have given up His Son to come to this earth and to do it all over again if you were the only person alive on this earth. If you were the only passenger on that unscheduled train, He would have still lowered the drawbridge at the expense of His one and His only Son. He loves you that much. If you don't know about His love, don't leave today without talking to someone.